Hey and welcome. Today we're diving into a pretty radical idea called the Ouroboros theory. It's a whole new way of looking at our global economy and, why it so often feels like it's on the brink of total chaos. So let's get right into it.
It's a question we all ask ourselves, right? We've got some of the most brilliant minds on the planet, mountains and mountains of data, and yet the global economy just feels so unpredictable. It feels chaotic. Why is it so darn hard to get it right?
Well, the theory we're digging into today says we've been using the wrong blueprint the whole time. We keep trying to fix the economy like it's a machine with a few broken parts. But what if it's not a machine at all? What if it's more like a complex, living ecosystem?
And that brings us to the Ouroboros, the ancient symbol of a serpent eating its own tail. It's the perfect metaphor, really. It captures the core idea that the global economy is one giant closed loop. Every single action, every policy, every decision eventually circles right back around to affect the entire system.
So here's our game plan for unpacking this. First, we're going to look at this new economic map. Then, we'll dive into the core tensions that really drive the whole thing. After that, we'll check out the moving parts, see how to handle all this complexity, and finally, talk about what it all means for forging a new kind of economic ethic.
All right, let's jump in. First up, a new economic map. And it all starts with seeing the economy as a completely closed system.
The series Ground Zero is this idea of the whole. And we're not just talking about markets and trade here. This is the total system of all human economic activity. And this is absolutely crucial, how it all interacts with our finite planet. In this model, there's no outside. Every consequence, good or bad, stays inside the system. Nothing escapes.
Now, to make sense of this huge idea, the theory breaks the whole into 4 parts. You can think of it like this. The container is the sandbox we're all playing in, our planet and its limits. The contents are all the players, you, me, companies, governments. And this whole system is driven by a rhythmic engine, the classic boom and bust cycles. And it's all pushed forward by creative fuel, which is basically the tension and innovation that forces everything to change.
So what really makes this whole thing tick? Well, that brings us right to Section 2. The system's core tensions. These are the invisible forces that are really running the engine under the hood.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. You know that huge, endless debate in economics between classical and Keynesian ideas? This theory says that's not a problem to be solved. It's the fundamental engine of the system. You need both. You need the static nature of classical economics, the rules, the structure, the stability. But you also absolutely need the dynamic nature of Keynesian ideas, the ability to react, to change, to handle a crisis. One is the foundation, the other is the lightning.
And this is how we can actually use that tension. The theory lays out 4 pillars for making policy. Symmetry gives us predictable order, like the rule of law. Balance is what keeps things from just flying off the rails. Think inflation targeting. Unity gives everyone a shared direction, like a big national project. And then there's paradox, which is all about embracing the creative chaos of new tech and market swings. A healthy system has to have all 4 working together.
Okay, so we've got the map and we've got the forces. Now let's zoom in a little for Section 3, the economy's moving parts. Who are the actual players here, and what rhythms are they moving to?
So in this view, different players have really specific jobs. You've got governments as the adaptive part, always trying to keep things in balance. Then you've got central banks providing the systemic scaffolding for everything else. But then you've got the wild cards, the relational tension of global supply chains, and the emergent creativity from startups that just injects novelty and, a little bit of chaos into the whole system.
And all these players are moving to 2 different beats. First, there's the adaptive cycle. That's the normal business cycle we all know and, we know it. Expansion, contraction, always trying to find its way back to balance. But then, there's the transformative spiral. This is a massive, radical leap that just completely reshapes the game. Think of the Industrial Revolution or the clean energy transition we're trying to navigate right now. It's a whole new science.
And this brings us to a really critical part of the theory in Section 4, navigating extreme complexity. How are we supposed to deal with problems that are just too big for any single human brain to wrap itself around?
The theory has a name for these, paradox webs, and they are a whole other level of complex. Just think about global supply chains for a second. We want them to be super efficient, right? So we can get cheap stuff. But we also need them to be resilient so they don't break during a pandemic or a climate disaster. Oh, and by the way, they also have to be ethical. See the problem? You can't just max out all 3 of those at once. They're in direct conflict. That's a paradox.
And this leads to a pretty stark conclusion from the source material. Our problems have just gotten too complex. The web of connections is so dense that we literally can't solve them the old way. Our brains, as amazing as they are, have kind of hit a wall.
So, what's the answer? The theory proposes something called the cognitive spiral, a true partnership between human leaders and AI. It's like a dance. It starts with the human spark. We define the why, the ethical goal. Then the AI amplifies our ability, mapping the insane complexity and modeling all the risks. Then it's back to humans for insight, to take that data and form a strategy. You execute, you get feedback, and you do the whole loop again, getting smarter every single time.
So all of that leads us here, to the final and maybe the most important part of this whole idea. Section 5, forging a new ethic. What is all this for? What's the point of managing all this complexity?
Well, the first step is a really big one. It's admitting that our main goal for decades, just endlessly growing GDP, isn't working anymore. It's what the source calls an informational collapse. It just leaves out way too much of what actually matters.
So instead, the theory says we need to push for what it calls Level 8, transcendent insights. This is all about creating a single, holistic vision that combines financial health with ecological stability and social trust. The end game here is to build a truly regenerative economy where all the parts can actually thrive together.
And at the very, very top of this whole framework is something called Level 9, the singular truth. And what's so important to get here is that this isn't some scientific formula. It's an ethical anchor. It's a core principle that's so deep and so universal that it reorients the entire system and guides every single policy decision that comes after it.
So what does a singular truth actually look like? Well, here's a pretty powerful example from the source text. Just think about that for a second. Imagine if every single economic decision we made, big or small, started from that one principle. How would that change our world? That's the kind of fundamental shift this theory is talking about.
So, to wrap all this up, here are the big things to take away. First, those huge economic fights we always have, they aren't flaws in the system, they're the engine. Second, we're going to need a new kind of partnership with AI if we want to get a handle on how complex the world has become. And third, the ultimate destination isn't just growth, it's an economy that's resilient, regenerative, and guided by a really clear ethical purpose.
And that leaves us with one last thing to chew on. We spend so much energy trying to smooth out all the conflict and friction in our economic systems. But what if that constant tension, that push and pull, what if that isn't a bug? What if it's the main feature that's actually driving us forward?